New Buddha-Way Dhamma Talks. Geoff Hunt presents a talk on some aspect of the Buddha's teaching.
The idea is taken from the Dhammapada, which is probably the most popular of all the Buddha's collection of teachings. Engineers channel the water, fletchers make arrows, carpenters form the wood, and wise people master themselves. The Buddha is a very practical person. He's not at all actually a theoretician of any kind, or he's not a philosopher or even a psychologist, as some people say. He's on a thing of his own, really. That's what makes him so special. But he's very practical in telling us how to awaken ourselves and be wiser and more peaceful, telling us how exactly to go about that by working on ourselves. He lived in a society, of course, which was very rural, and in which there were all kinds of artisans, like carpenters and fletchers making arrows for bows, and people channeling water, people planting and harvesting, people looking after animals. It's all very hands-on. So you can see why so many of his parables, which he tries to make his teaching clear, or his instructions clear, are actually based on hands-on activities, or what you might call artisan activities, which of course is something that we've largely lost in our society. But it helps to understand the Buddha's teaching if you realise that that was his kind of main way of thinking and teaching, was to draw on actual practices. When he says engineers, it's not quite the right word, channel the water, he's actually thinking of irrigation. So the water wants to go anywhere it likes. Our mind wants to go anywhere it likes. However, the engineer is channeling the water in a particular direction where it'll be most fruitful. So, now think what he means by that. We can channel our minds in the direction which is most fruitful in terms of our understanding and our peace and our appreciation of our existence, if you like, and of each other. Without that channeling, the water will just go where it likes, and sometimes very destructive. When water is not channeled, it can do a lot of damage, of course. When it is channeled, then you've got irrigation, and you can grow rice, grow all sorts of other things. Then fletchers make arrows. Well, again, if you're going to make an arrow for whatever reason, then the arrow has to go in a particular direction, and you try to throw a stick at a bird to make a pie, then that's not likely to work very well. I don't think the Buddha was a one who hunted, actually, but he's speaking to ordinary people, so he's making himself understood. That you have to use your hands, and you have to apply skills. The kind of intelligence you need is practical intelligence. It doesn't really come from the intellect very much, although that's helpful too sometimes. It's learning how to do something. So it involves hands-on training. So you can't swim without getting in the water. You can't do any of the practical things we do. Can you cook without ever getting the flour and the water and the butter, whatever, together and kneading them together, and have some sort of practical intelligence as to how they blend, what time is needed, at what temperature to cook. It's we have books with recipes on how to cook, but I think the best cooks have a kind of intuitive feel about cooking. Isn't that right? They will come up with something without necessarily looking at a recipe at all. They will just know what blends together, and know from experience, from building up experience, how to get the result they want. So, again, the metaphor is telling us that it's not essentially a matter of reading books. It's a matter of doing something, working on yourself. And of course the question is how exactly. It doesn't come very naturally to people. But then cooking never came naturally to human beings either. They used to just kill animals and eat them, usually raw. Okay, and the next line is that carpenters form the wood, of course. So I think those are very fruitful metaphors in explaining that it's something that you have to do. So, you know, you could become a professor of Buddhism and never practice Buddhism. You could know all about Buddhism but not be any the wiser. You just have a lot of knowledge. You see what I mean? It's a different thing. If I advertise a course on Buddhism, I get a lot of people coming. And they write things down and they tell them all about Mahayana, Theravada and all the rest of it. And they seem quite happy and they go away and they don't practice for 5 minutes. It's a different ball game. It's not to say that such things aren't interesting. And we actually spend a lot of money travelling about, going to museums in other parts of the world to look at things. But we're not engaged with them. It's not hands-on engagement. You know, the Buddha's talking about hands-on engagement. Wise people master themselves, just as the engineers, the fletchers, the carpenters, the rest of it are mastering themselves in their abilities, their skills. Let's take the carpenter. The carpenter isn't just mastering the wood. The carpenter is mastering his ability to work with the wood. You see, we might think the carpenter is working with the wood. Well, of course he is working with the wood, but mainly he's actually working with his skills to be able to work with the wood. Well, that's what you've got to do, but not as carpenters. Right? You've got to develop your skills in working with those responses, attitudes, patterns of thought that arise and take you in perhaps one direction, like the free-flowing water. But if you can master certain skills, then you can say, well, you're not going where you like, you do a lot of damage over there, well, let's channel it that way instead. So that is what he means by saying wise people master themselves. Right, then the question, of course, becomes, well, how do you do that? How do you do that? When we're meditating, that's what we should be trying to do. It's not easy at first. It gets easier as you go along. It's like starting with anything. Any musician will tell you probably, you know, the first few lessons are really the most difficult. Fingers don't want to go where you would tell them to go, don't seem to be harmonized in any way. They're basically doing what they like, or they've not been stretched enough. It's difficult to know what the teacher exactly wants sometimes, until now and then things will go right and you think, oh, that's what it is. But what you're developing is actually muscle memory, isn't it? It's like once you've learned how to ride a bike, you probably never forget. Where is that? Where is that memory? Well, it's sometimes called motor energy or motor skills. That is, it's as though the memory is not something you recall. It's embedded in your responses, in your muscle, if you like. Okay. Well, in a way, learning to meditate in a fruitful way is also largely a kind of muscle energy. It's not just knowing how in an intellectual way. It's been able to do, even without thinking about it. You know, a very skilled craftsman probably doesn't spend a lot of time thinking about what he or she is going to do. It's just that the hands are trained to do things in the right way. So that is what we're trying to develop in early meditation.
New Buddha way lets go of East and West and starts afresh in the life we have now. For more information, visit www.newbuddhaway.org.